All right, folks, we are joined by Sean Horgan, a writer for the Gloucester Times. Thanks for joining us, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Sean.
Hey, Heather.
So you've written a couple of great pieces on the fishing industry. Well, you always write great pieces on the fishing industry in the Gloucester Times, but recently there have been some really interesting ones. You want to tell us about the impact of the COVID-19 emergency on the fishing industry?
Sure. It's as the stories have read, and as you can find almost anywhere where fishing is important, the impact has been devastating. And it's been devastating. You know, there's such a symbiotic relationship between all segments of the fishing and the seafood industry, and they're so dependent on each other. And when something like this hits, it goes all the way up and down the line. So you're hurting fishermen, boats aren't going out. The restaurants closing was huge because now there's very little product for very little market for the live product. So you don't have boats going out. Processors don't want, they're not looking for lobsters. They're not looking for fish. Guys are sitting idle for the most part.
Right. So it really comes down to the fact that restaurants have come to us. The restaurant
that was the crippling blow. Things were difficult before that. But once you lost the restaurants, everybody got hurt by that.
Right. And the lobster industry also, right?
Well, the lobster industry has gone through a litany of problems this year, dealing with, whale closures, dealing with bait shortages, and then, of course, the tariff war with China closed off that market. Europe had already been closed off to American lobster processors who send over, wholesalers who send overseas. And then for this to happen, and to lose the largest, segment of their market, which is restaurants, that's where by far more lobsters are consumed than anywhere, was really, really, really tough.
Right. Well, then there's also the issue of the fishing monitors, right?
Yeah, there's a battle that actually the fishing industry won, and good for them. It seemed inconceivable that NOAA would mandate them to continue taking strangers on board their ship, people you have absolutely no idea what their health history is, where they've been, how hygienic they are, and for them to go as long as they did, I thought that was a bad optic for NOAA. And Dave Levier, one of the sector managers here in Gloucester, Sector 2 and Sector 6, really led the charge on that, and really, I think, forced NOAA to reconsider what they were doing. But don't forget, that's only in effect until April 4th. After that, they'll review it, and observers could be right back on those boats.
So just to remind people what that situation is, could you describe it?
Sure. Under the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which regulates commercial fishing in the United States, there is a demand in that act that commercial fishermen, particularly ground fishermen up here in the Northeast, ground fishery, take observers on their boats. And these observers are actually contractors. They're not federal employees. There are companies that provide these observers to NOAA, and then they go on these boats and they watch you fish, and they make sure that you're adhering to all of the regulations, and God knows there's plenty of them that are also part of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So in some ways, fishermen, not in some ways, in every way, fishermen consider it incredibly intrusive and really distrustful. But they've lost in court on this time and time again, and observers are here to stay.
So, but then to ask to repeat what you said, to ask the fishermen to take on these strangers, and you have no idea what their health history is or where they've been in an age of COVID-19, is unthinkable. And in fact,
and it ran contrary to everything else the federal government was telling us to do in terms of social distancing, in terms of reducing your human contact. So it really made no sense. So I'm glad they did what they did.
Yeah, me too. So then you have one more good news story really about the industry, the 99 restaurant.
Well, 99 is hanging in there. They've been the largest supporter of the Gloucester Fresh program. They're by far the most prominent partner that the city has in that branding program. And so, they're closed like every other restaurant except for takeout. And there was some question as to whether they were going to be able to hold up their end. And Charlie Noyes says they're going to be able to. They anticipate buying 750,000 pounds of haddock just for that one program, that one partnership that they have with the city.
Landed in Gloucester. Landed in Gloucester.
Landed in Gloucester, yeah. There might be some that's landed in New Bedford, but by far the vast majority is landed in Gloucester. So that's good news. And hopefully they can get back up and running and being a full service in-site dining restaurant. I think that's really the only way it's really going to work. But they've also decided to expand their haddock presence on their menu, and they're replacing the Icelandic cod that they used in the fish and chips with haddock. But this is frozen haddock, and some of it will be landed in Gloucester, but not all of it.
Still, I was really surprised that they were using Icelandic haddock.
Well, you go into Market Basket and you see cod, and that's where it's coming from. It's coming from Norway. It's coming from Iceland. So I wasn't really shocked by it, but I think moving to the haddock is a really good thing. And they told me something yesterday that seemed inconceivable, but it's true. They now are the largest purveyors of haddock. They now represent the 3 million pounds that they're going to buy for these two programs represents something like 15%. I forget what I wrote. I should remember things that I write, but I don't remember this. But it's 20% of all haddock, frozen and fresh, that's ultimately landed and ends up in restaurants and in fish stores and in supermarkets. So that's a huge chunk.
That is huge.
It is a huge chunk. But we're talking 3 million pounds of haddock. I mean, that's what they're envisioning in total.
Yeah. So somebody really likes Gloucester haddock.
I do. I think a lot of people, it's really amazing. I live very close to the head of the harbor. And so I'm walking my dogs right down there where Conley's is and where the head of the harbor is. And we walk the fish pier. And every morning I see people, Conley's parking lot is full every morning. So even in this crisis, people want Gloucester seafood. There's just no doubt about it.
Sean, it's interesting you say that because I actually know of some eateries and bakeries around town that are trying to get me to connect them with local fishermen so they can buy directly, but I don't know if they can do that without a dealer permit.
Well, I'm not sure about the finfish guys. I believe they can, but they need if it's like lobsters, they need a specific type of permit, and they can get that permit. DMF has those permits. That was one of the things when I wrote the lobster story. Beth Cassoni at the Mass Lobstermen's Association said that they were working with DMF to get more of these permits in the hands of lobstermen, meaning they can sell to consumers right off their boat. And I think you're going to see that happen. I know at least one lobster processor here in town, lobster wholesaler, who's looking at that idea. So in terms of finfish, I know it's already happening in Maine. I gotta think it's going to happen here.
Well, moving on a little bit, there is some more good news for the fishing industry. Do you want to tell about what happened in Washington yesterday or last night, I think?
Well, yeah, last night the Senate passed a $2 trillion economic stimulus bailout bill, COVID-19 bailout bill. And included in that, there's a couple of items that should help the commercial fishing industry. It's not when you look at $2 trillion, it's an enormous amount of money. But they've in that budget, in that legislation, there's $300 million in fishery assistant funds that will go to the commercial fishing industry. Now, we don't know how that's going to be. The details of this really haven't been worked out in terms of eligibility, in terms of who's going to manage this. It's going to be a grant system and a loan system, I'm sure. And then there's another $350 billion in loans for small businesses for which commercial fishermen are also eligible. So there is going to be money. How it will be doled out, who will be doling it out, what the eligibility requirements are, we don't know that yet, but there's something in the pipeline anyway.
Well, we will be watching your column to find out and learn more.
Okay, well then I better get to work.
Yeah, you better. Will you join us as a guest again, though?
Yeah, anytime. Sure.
Okay, good.
Once we get the gremlins out of the system.
Yeah, we figured Skype out, Sean. Yeah, this is smooth sailing from here on in, we hope.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
great.
right, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
you bet, guys.
Be well.
Bye.